Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi Richard, it's great to have you here today. How are you?
Good, thanks Lisa. Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. For those who don't know you, do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a bit about you?
Thanks, yeah. So I'm Richard Kennedy. I'm the co-founder of Cornerstone Place, which is a social enterprise that's dedicated to helping charities that support homeless people to find the right properties, and then ultimately our aim is that those charities end up owning those assets themselves.
Fantastic. So what's your background? How did you end up doing this then, Richard?
Cool. So I've got a bit of a long checkered kind of career history. My first career was in restaurants, and then I went and did an MBA to kind of create a career change. And on the MBA, I actually did it in South Africa, discovered this concept called social enterprise. I did this in 2006. It was kind of very much at the start of the social enterprise sector, I guess, in the UK, and came back and started working in that sector, developing, working with charities to help them to become more sustainable. We ran a venture philanthropy fund, and then I became, my sort of mastermind topic would be kind of social impact measurement, and I became an accredited social return on investment practitioner. And so I was really kind of passionate about working with the sector to help them to be more sustainable, but also be good at measuring and managing their impact. And then I've had various other sort of roles in big sort of international charities. I did a little stint with marketing strategy consultancy, which was quite interesting, traveling all over the world and helping brands to be a bit more purposeful. And then in, I think about 2017, I thought, it's time to do something different. And having supported charities and social enterprises for a long time, I wanted to set one up myself, and met my co-founder David Ball at a property training event, and we started talking, and 1 + 1 = 150, and we created Cornerstone Place. David's background is much more in kind of property, and he's a sort of main contractor and builder, I guess, back in the day, and has his own version of lived experience of homelessness, because a very close member of his family experienced homelessness, and so he has a real passion for doing something about it. My passion is about the social sector and creating sustainable business models, and so it didn't take us very long when we started talking about property to end up looking at a way that we could support charities around homelessness. And then a couple of other bits I do. I'm on the board of Social Value International, which is an international membership organisation for people who are passionate about measuring impact. We've got thousands of members, probably across 25 countries. I work very closely with Social Enterprise UK, and I'm also on the board, or I chair what's called the ESG subgroup of Mears PLC, which some of your listeners may be aware of, one of the biggest providers of maintenance services for social housing in the country. And so I've been working with them for a number of years to help them to think about how they can be the best possible, and most trusted provider of services to the public sector. So there's a variety of different things that we do, but Cornerstone Place is the core of what I spend my time on now, and really passionate about helping homeless charities to have the best possible provision that they can, but also end up hopefully owning those assets themselves.
And that's a really interesting concept, I think, isn't it? Is the fact that that's your end goal, is that the charities will end up owning these properties. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and how that happens? Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think what we realised when we started talking to charities is that there is a desperate need, and we were talking just before about there's a bit of limited stock availability for these organisations, and so often the options that they have are to rent from private sector landlords or to work with pension funds, and there's quite a lot of pension funds out there that are providing stock on volume to charities like this. And one charity we met was approached by a pension fund and was told, we'll buy £6 million worth of property for you, all you've got to do is sign a lease for 20 years with RPI increases, which is great because the charity then gets good property immediately, but in 20 years' time it becomes very expensive, and all of the capital gain ends up with the pension fund, not with the charity. And so the charity ends up having to just keep going on signing new leases. And so what we want to do is try and take some of that risk, the property acquisition and development risk, away from the charity by doing that ourselves. But over time, we want the charity to end up owning that asset. And we know we don't want to be long-term landlords. We want the charities to be the long-term landlords. We want them to have those assets in the communities where they operate, to ensure that they can be there for the long term, that they're not going to, get to the end of a contract. And, I've heard this on multiple occasions where the RP says, you know what, we're not going to rent you that property anymore because we've decided we want it back in our portfolio. Well, then, the charity then can't compete for that contract. And those beneficiaries, are then, back out on the street. So we want the charities to be in control. We want them to end up owning the assets, and we want them to end up, building that balance sheet that they can leverage, like we as property investors, you buy property, you wait for it to go up in value a little bit, you leverage, you buy some more. And I want those those concepts from the private sector to be applied to these sort of smaller-ish kind of more localized charities, so that they can build those assets and they can provide those services for the community for the long term.
That obviously sounds really appealing. I can imagine a lot of the providers listening are thinking, this sounds great. I love the idea of that for the organisation that I'm working in or that I'm running. How does that actually work from a finance point of view? Because presumably you're buying expensive sites. We all know that costs of builds are going up and up at the moment, and developing those sites. How does that work, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, and we're very transparent with the charities and the registered providers that we work with to explain how we can manage to do that. I'm probably not going to go into great detail on that, at least having spent 3 or 4 years and literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds on legal fees to get that right. But essentially, it's we take the initial risk, we fully fund the projects, we raise all of the money, and I'm sure this concept's probably not not new to your listeners and viewers, but when you've got a lease on a property. We have long-term leases with our partners. When you've got a lease on a property, that adds value, and that allows, at the back end of the development, it allows us to transition onto more long-term, cheaper amortizing debt rather than kind of more expensive investment. But we work with great banks and social investors who give great rates and are very understanding of our social mission. And then ultimately it just becomes an asset that you start to pay down the debt on, and it makes it easier and easier for charities to end up owning the asset. And we take a haircut to make sure that they can do that. Fantastic.
So from the organisation's point of view, it's not hugely a lot more expensive than the lease rent would be normally, or is there a considerable higher cost for them?
No, I mean, our starting point is always LHA, and then we essentially look at the costs of developing whatever the asset is and what the long-term debt's going to be, and we very transparently say, well, we can't service that long-term debt on LHA. It needs to be LHA plus £10, or it needs to be LHA plus £20, or whatever it is. But we're fully trying. If we can do LHA, we always start at that point, and we've done sites, at LHA. We're doing sites slightly above LHA. It just depends on the dynamics. And I'd imagine in somewhere like Westminster, we'd probably need to do LHA plus quite a lot, given the cost of property and the development opportunities in Westminster. Whereas in some of the boroughs up in the north. Manchester is actually quite expensive now, but further outside of Manchester, perhaps it is a bit more conceivable to do it, at LHA rates. But we're fully transparent. We're not, people will see exactly how we come to those conclusions, and it's not that we're. Anyway, it's just about servicing that debt. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
And the kind of properties that you're developing, what do they look like? What sort of buildings are you working on?
Yeah, I mean, we do anything and everything. So the most important thing is that we're impact led. So we go and talk to organisations. We don't come with charities, and I know there's a lot of landlords, which is fantastic. Who've got stock and they want to put it to good use, and that's brilliant. We don't start there. We start with a charity, which means we can't be as quick as some of the landlords who've already got stock. But we start with the charity and ask them what is it they're looking for, and they might say, what we really want is 10 sort of self-contained apartments, an office space for some of our staff, and maybe a drop-in centre with some washing machines, for other people who might help, or something like that. And then we go into the market all the same way that I'm sure your other listeners would, looking at local estate agents, calling people in our network to see if we can find sites or offices or plots of land, and then we'll develop, based on that. So we've done sort of HMOs into self-contained. We're doing support, C2, upgrading C2 accommodation. We're doing conversions of offices. We've got one site at the moment which is put planning in a couple of weeks ago for 63 units in east of England. So the sort of office to resi conversions. And we've got a new build site at the moment. Again, we're just waiting, unfortunately, because we're very transparent, and we said who the beneficiaries were in the planning application. There was a little bit of not in my backyard, so we've had a few complaints. It's going to committee, but we've got strong support from the local authority. So we're doing some new build accommodation as well, and that new build is quite exciting. It's going to be probably operationally carbon net zero, and with kind of mechanical ventilation, all that sort of stuff, and PV on the roof, on the ceilings, on the roof instead of the tiles, and it's probably going to be about £200 per year per unit to heat and light.
Wow!
And obviously, in the kind of current environment, that's absolutely bonkers. But the most important thing is again that it becomes sustainable, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be aware that the transition that people face, particularly we work with charities that work with people who are normally higher needs, but they need to transition into being able to manage their own tenancy and pay their own bills, and obviously in a scenario where the utilities are only going to be £200 a year, that is much more sustainable than one where, I don't know about you, but my utilities have probably doubled in the last 12 months. So that's a much easier starting place for some of these beneficiaries.
And so when you're talking about units, are you talking about like a standard 1-bed flat size, or are they smaller than that, or what are they?
Yeah, I mean, we do a variety. So obviously some of the sort of C2, the planning regulations around C2, you can go a bit smaller. I mean, I don't think we ever go much below 20 square meters, but obviously we're planning now with office to residential, you have to go to minimum space standards, so it has to be 37 square meters, and we tend to do a mix of 1 and 2 beds, because the charities that we work with sometimes have they work with single parents or people fleeing domestic violence, that sort of thing, and so they would have children with them as well, so it's helpful for the charities to give them an option of 2 beds as well. But yeah, we again, it's fully transparent, and we present this is we could make floor plans look like this. The charity goes, that's great, that's perfect, or some might say, well, you know what, we need it to be bigger. But what we find when we talk to charities is actually the beneficiaries themselves tend to not want, and it's not necessarily very helpful for them to be in big units. And I've heard countless stories of, you work with someone, you take them from a hostel or what have you, and you put them in a 1-bed flat, and they move their beds and everything else out of the bedroom into the lounge, and they sort of live in the lounge because they're not used to having so much space. So again, we're led by the charity. So the charity tell us, we want 1-bed flats because the sort of people we work with are of this particular type. then that's what we'll deliver. And if they say, you know what, we want cluster, we need to be able to support these people intensively, we want 10 and they need to be small units, then we try and achieve that. And we work with our planning consultants and professional advisors to try and create the optimum outcome for the charity based on what's going to give them the biggest impact.
Fantastic. I mean, that's certainly a case. I know, I agree. Lots of organisations say the 37 metres squared, particularly if you're looking at care leavers as well, they can be, it's quite a large unit to be in for a short term, place as well, if it's a transition. So these are a mixture of sort of transition properties and actual long-term stays for people, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, it just depends on the charity, and they need to make it work both ways. And, we're starting to learn more and more about the social rents and all that sort of stuff. That's quite a complicated. There's a lot. I think you could do a PhD in the complexity around how you calculate social rents and what's allowed and what's not allowed and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, obviously, as people transition away from care, they need to be able to afford that rent by themselves, and so there's a bit of sensitivity, isn't there, in terms of being able to pay those high rent levels, because the beneficiary themselves has to be able to pay that. So there's a bit of a control of the market at the moment, I think, that reduces some of those intensive housing charges to ensure that they're more affordable for the tenants.
Definitely, that's a sticking point for a lot of organisations, isn't it? Is that transition?
Yeah.
And for people who get stuck there. That's fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. It's been really helpful. Is there anything else you want to say, anything, advice or anything else that you feel like people, I think a lot of people listening will think this sounds really fascinating, a really interesting way to sort of get involved. And obviously we'll put your contact details in the show notes so people can find you, Richard. But for anyone thinking of coming into this space and looking at getting started, is there anything you think people need to think about?
Well, I'll sort of step back a bit to the macro picture, and I was amazed. We sort of got going during COVID, and we really thought that there was going to be a huge, tsunami of presentations during COVID. And I think that everyone in, program was brilliant, and it showed, how we as a society can look after the most vulnerable in society when we really put our minds to it. But when all of that started, when all of that stopped and furloughs stopped and all the other things stopped, I really expected there would be a very quick increase in presentations. And then suddenly we had this weird thing where, there was more vacancies in the job market than people trying to apply. And then now we're in this crazy situation with inflation. And I think the whole macro picture is worrying. And, having spent a lot of time, in the social sector and working with charities and thinking about, the kind of the macro picture, generally when there's change, you tend to find that, the asset owners, the stockholders, all of those, they will do well. The people that, the JP Morgans and all of those guys, they'll do well because there's a change and they'll make a margin on all of those transfers. The people in the middle will probably suffer because we've got an increasing cost of living, and the people at the bottom will be disproportionately, they'll disproportionately suffer. So I really think that there's unfortunately going to be a big influx in people requiring, high quality, good value. And I know that, I hope that that's possible. And I hope that your listeners will believe and stand with me that that's a possible thing, that we can have high quality, low cost housing. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to need that. And I think, unfortunately, there will be a lot of people that will need support as inflation keeps going up and costs keep going up. People are not going to be able to afford to stay where they are, and it's devastating that that's going to happen. So I would really encourage your listeners, particularly those that are landlords, to think about diverting more of their portfolio into supported accommodation. I'm sure it's a great kind of brilliant from a kind of impact perspective, but it's also much more long term. All of my own residential property is rented through that mechanism, and they're brilliant tenants. They look after, they're very house proud, they're really all of the rest of it. So I would encourage people to think about that. And then also, you know, the local charities that you're working with, you know, try and think about how you can serve them. Don't start with you, what you've got. Start with them, and what's important to them. And that's exactly what Cornerstone Place does. That's our starting point, is how can we serve you? How can we deliver the best impact for you? And that's our starting point. And then it goes through to, hopefully, you know, doing lots of projects, which we are with lots of charities up and down the country.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. It's been great chatting to you today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.